Hello, welcome to our 35th video in our Through My Bible in 1 Year series, where we review some of the readings of the past week and look forward to some of the readings that are coming up this next week. Hard to believe we are so far along in our Through My Bible in 1 Year series, but this past week, as you continued through the book of Isaiah, you came to that section that was just chock full of messianic prophecies, very familiar prophecies that we often read around Christmas time. Well, while we are familiar with the prophecies, we aren't necessarily as familiar with the context in which those prophecies were first spoken. And so that's what I had asked you to think about as you came to each of those prophecies. Note the context of each of those prophecies, especially Isaiah 7 verse 14, the virgin will conceive and will give birth to a son. We want to note that that was given as a sign to wicked King Ahaz, who refused to ask the Lord for a sign even when God came to him through Isaiah and said, "Ask me for a sign that I may prove who I am to you." And Ahaz said, I don't care about God. I don't want to worry about signs and so forth. And God said, okay, I'll give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son. And in chapter 9, you have the famous section, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. Goes on with the names that we apply to Jesus: Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. But we note that that just doesn't come out of nowhere. It stands in contrast to what happens at the end of chapter 8, when the people are relying on mediums and spiritists because they think they need to know what the future, the immediate future, holds for them. But God says, these people who are in darkness, I'm going to show them a great light in the person of my Son who comes to save them. And similarly, too, in chapter 11, when we read that a shoot will spring up from the stump of Jesse, and that righteous branch that then brings salvation to his people, we note that only is listed after God details the destruction that God's people are going to have to undergo, especially through the Assyrians in chapter 10. The Assyrians are brought up again and again, and it's during the reign of King Ahaz and King Hezekiah that the northern kingdom is destroyed. So during the prophetic work of Isaiah, I'm sort of spoiling some of next week's readings by talking too much about that right now. But the northern kingdom is destroyed. God says, even after that destruction, I'll preserve a remnant of my people, and I will raise up from the stump of Jesse. After it looks like they've been cut down, there's still going to be life, and that life will be the person of the Savior. I'd also ask you, as you looked at the last few chapters of Matthew, to think about the pace of Matthew chapters 26 through 28. And I did it for these reasons. First of all, we spend 40 days in Lent, and we carefully consider the details of Jesus' passion and his suffering and death. And here Matthew, in just 3 chapters, quickly goes through the arrest, the trials, the suffering, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus. And it comes at us rather quickly. All of a sudden, you may have started your readings, and then all of a sudden you've got Jesus not only arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, but he's already raised from the dead. It seems to move rather quickly. But there is a message for us just in the pacing of Matthew. Now, Matthew does have an awful lot of details for us, but we do need the other Gospels to fill in some of the blanks, such as the rest of the 7 words from the cross. And while it is a very good thing, of course, to do what we do in Lent, meditating on the details of Jesus' passion, it's also good to look at Jesus' work on our behalf in this big picture sense, because we remember then that this is just one aspect of God's whole plan of salvation, which stretches all the way back into eternity. It's the most vital, necessary part of that salvation, absolutely. But it's good to read all of it in one big chunk and then be able to apply it to ourselves and understand what Jesus did for us, he did as part of God's eternal plan for us. Matthew helps us do that in his pacing. As you move on this week, you'll read one chapter from 2 Chronicles and one chapter from 2 Kings that will detail the end of the northern kingdom of Israel. So I'd ask you to go back and continue that list of kings of both Israel and Judah, and your list of kings of Israel is going to come to an end with that last king. Then as you continue through Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, you read the first 2 chapters this past week, and you're going on with chapters 3 through 7 this week. As you read, see if you can detect some of the difficulties that were going on in the congregation in Corinth that prompted Paul's first epistle to the Corinthians. God's blessings on your reading this week, and we'll look forward to seeing you in our video next week.